apply direct revenue sources. So if we have an area like the police department that has charges for services for things like our Safe Speed for Camera or our red light programs, that money first reduces their expenses, and then what's left, we would utilize tax revenue to cover. And as you can see, the largest portion of our tax dollars, 53 cents on every dollar, is being spent in public safety. Public safety at the City of Hagerstown includes police, fire, signal, and code administration. And this is just a reflection of operating side. What we spend and how much we spend on the infrastructure and the capital projects in this chart would be represented under the little green box that says capital and projects infrastructure. I'm going to turn the page. Any major questions before I move on assessed values? On page 9, I wanted to stop and point out general fund balance reserves. This is another one of those areas that's always a big topic. What we did this year, for the first time, we added a new chart. We felt that it was important to stop again, because one of the things that people talk about is the unassigned portion of the general fund balance reserve. The unassigned portion is the dollar amount that is not committed or obligated in existing any other commitments, agreements, outstanding purchase orders, known contracts, and we included a chart for a 5-year period. One of the things that's really important to remember with this general fund reserves is that we do not utilize it to pay for ongoing or recurring operating expenses, meaning that we would never recommend utilizing this in order to pay for something like salary increases that are going to repeat every single year, because the reserves is something that does not repeat. It's an accumulation of what is built up since the inception of the city. We do have a policy, and one of the things our rating agencies, both Moody's and S&P, are very complimentary of the City of Hagerstown towards is the fact that we have this policy, we have targets, and we are very fiscally responsible. So this chart represents 5 years. It shows you the dollar amount that we have in the unassigned fund balance compared to how much we spent in all operating expenses. Then it shows you the percent. So of all of the expenses we paid, how much percent do we have accumulated in our fund balance? And then number of months. And the number of months means that if we had to close our doors today, how much is built up in our fund balance that we could continue to pay for all of our outstanding bills? And as of fiscal year 20 audited numbers, that is 3.5 months. Sounds like a long time, but it's not when you consider the big things like outstanding pension and outstanding health insurance costs. Our city balance, per the policy in percentages, is 17%, and the number of months is 2. So we ended the year, fiscal year 20, at 29.3 and 3.5 months. So we're definitely over. We're meeting that budget and our policy, and we're exceeding it. So with all of that said, in our fiscal year 22 budget, we are including reallocating $937,000 of this unassigned amount to use towards one-time purchases. And I just want to take a minute to say that this does not represent additional fund balance reserves that I'm asking permission to utilize, but instead, in fiscal year 21, we allocated approximately $2.4 million that we were going to use in projects. Some of that money has already been spent. The balance that hasn't is $937,000. This chart will show you at the very top 2 new projects. So that means last year when we approved the budget, we did not include Market House improvements, which is a roof, and consolidation of public services safety assets, which is land acquisition, which we'll be hearing a little bit more about later tonight. Again, that's $400,000. Again, money that we had set aside for one-time purposes. In fiscal year 21, we just set them aside for a different project, something that's not going to come to fruition, or projects in which we received a different funding source to help cover. The projects listed at the bottom, including vehicles, things at the Public Works Operations Center, the improvements being done here at City Hall and at Fairgrounds Park. Those were all included at the point we did the fiscal year 21 budget. It's just projects that have been deferred and we haven't been able to move forward, and we're hoping to continue that and get that started in fiscal year 22. So again, not new amounts, and even with spending this, we should still, all things being equal, considering where we are right now in fiscal year 21, we anticipate that we are going to still be at a minimum, be able to meet our fund balance policy of 17% in 2 months. Next, and I know I'm going super fast, guys, and I'm sorry for all the new people attempting to keep up. Next, I'm just going to turn it over to Brooke for a few minutes. We're going to go to the highlights section, which starts on page 16 of section 1, and just take a minute to hit 2 high-level citywide highlights that are important to discuss.
Okay, the first one is the CARES Act funding that the city was awarded. The chart here breaks down the funding into 3 categories: PPE reimbursement through the county, public safety reimbursement through the county, and funding through CDBG. In FY21, $1.7 million is expected to be utilized in total, with $465,000 in CDBG budgeted for FY22. Number 2, American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. We went over this last week. I'm just going to run through it one more time. The city was awarded a little over $20 million in funding. It's not in the budget until we have more definite direction. But as of now, 50% of the funding will be received within 60 days of approval, with the remaining 50% of funding to be received 12 months after the initial funds are received. The deadline to have all funds spent is December 31st, 2024, and the allowable uses of funds are respond or mitigate the COVID-19 health emergency or its negative economic impacts, including assistance to households, small businesses, nonprofits, and aid for tourism, travel, and hospitality, provide essential workers with premium pay, cover revenue losses incurred as a result of COVID-19, and make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure.
And one of the things there, just important, again, citywide highlights, both of those are federal grants with federal restrictions and reporting in place. One-time items in which we just do not anticipate receiving, high dollar CARES reimbursement to continue, and then definitely the American Rescue Plan Act. I think the last that we heard was it was possible to towards the middle of May would be when we received the first amount, but also likely that no further information will be available on the actual uses and exclusions until probably about the same time that the money, that first 50% is released. Next up, just want to take a minute, again, talking overall citywide. So we're still in section 1, but this time we're going to flip to page 28. Going to stop to talk a minute just to look at a staffing chart. And the reason we're going to look at staffing is because one of the largest components and expenditures across the city, of course, is in staff and benefits, being, our core service in our community is to provide community services. It's not abnormal for a governmental agency to have the largest share there. This chart, again, is a 5-year history. The staffing chart here will reflect total approved FTEs and positions, meaning this might not necessarily be a reflection of how many people are actually hired in every given area, but it will reflect the number of approved positions in that area. And with the positions that are approved, we make sure that we include in our budget dollars so that if these positions are filled, we are not going to have a budget crisis and have to make up those differences. They are already included in there. One of the things I do want to point out is in fiscal year 22, it's one of the years we've probably seen more changes between fiscal years than in recent past. One of the changes is in shifting of position, and again, when I say a shift in position, we still have the same number of staff and the same people providing the same services, but between CDBG, our Community Development Block Grant Program, as well as our newly created and segregated stormwater fund. We had existing employees in the general fund that are spending adequate time in each of these funds. So we are tracking and measuring and transitioning their time and their dollars to reflect there. So we're also changing them as a percentage on this chart so that that could be seen and tie with what we included in the budget. In addition to that, so about 0.7 of the total change is a shift to CDBG, 5.36 is a shift for stormwater. On the other changes that you're gonna notice then, as far as overall reduction or changes in total staffing, is the unfunding of 1 vacant position in human resources, the unfunding of 8 sworn positions in the police department, and unfunding of 1 full-time position in the electric fund. Again, all of those funds, all of those positions that were mentioned that were unfunded were for vacant positions, and we were positions that had been vacant for a little while. So it wasn't like it was something we said, ooh, let's hurry and do this. It's a reflection more closely to mirror where we would like to be when we're fully staffed. One of the things that I don't think I stop enough to remind people is this staffing schedule is a high level. It reflects the entire citywide. As you get through the budget book back in different sections where you can start to see departmental information, every department that has a separate sheet will list their overall program objectives and goals. It also includes the expenses for in that individual department, but at the bottom, it also includes their staffing so that you could see it at a little bit different breakout so that you could actually see staffing and line it up with the line that says salaries and wages. I think the final charts that we're going to look at tonight, some of my favorite pages, they're not charts, it's a lot of information. No pretty charts, I guess I should say, no pretty pie charts or anything with different colors. But starting on page 36, up to this point in the budget message, it's been big picture items, more citywide. As we get further along, it talks about specific items within individual funds. So on page 36 is a good snapshot that looks at the revenue in the general fund.
We'll go into more detail in future work sessions, but for tonight, the chart here summarizes the sources of funding that support the general fund budget. Property tax revenue is the largest source of revenue at $33 million, up 3.8% from FY21. That's 70.2% of total revenue when excluding transfers from other funds and appropriated use of fund balance, or 68% when including those sources. Income and other taxes is the next highest funding source at $4.4 million. Income taxes make up $2.8 million of this total. Charges for services, licenses and permits, and fines and forfeitures are also significant revenue sources here. And 2 categories with large percent changes are intergovernmental revenues and interest on investments. Intergovernmental revenues are down 80.2, and that's just because of the one-time CARES Act funding we received in FY21. And interest on investments are down just because of low interest rates.
Actually, interest rates are so low, I think I mentioned it last time, but we're almost paying more in fees than we're receiving in interest. And is not a reflection that our cash balances have suffered. That is not the case. It truly is a reflection of the financial market. And in addition to the revenue, I do want to come back and, as Brooke pointed out on that chart, under income and other taxes, would be state, what we formerly were able to call state shared revenues, meaning these sources of monies flow from the state, either from the state directly to us here at the city, or from the state to the county, from the county to us. Of that, the state income tax portion is budgeted at $2.8 million. I want to stop and mention that because it is our second single largest revenue source in a general fund. And it could potentially change and decrease for a variety of reasons. The state making unemployment wages tax-free for the next 2 years could have some impact. If businesses don't remain and close, then they're not collecting payroll taxes, it will go down. The last portion that is calculated into here is a portion that is controlled by counties across the state, and that is the counties have the authority to set the local percentage, meaning for every person here who is a member of Maryland, when you file your income taxes at the end of the year, there's a portion that's set aside on there automatically to the state, but then there's a portion that goes to your county or municipality. And again, the counties are the designated areas that are the authority to approve that, and the maximum amount that you can have is 3%. So our fiscal year 22 budget was built on that preface that that was going to be the percentage, and it's possible that that may be getting decreased to 2.8%, which will have an impact, but typically those changes occur on a calendar basis and not on a fiscal base, meaning anytime you change that percentage, it would happen in January 1. So we may have some shifting there or a decrease there. Again, wasn't something anticipated at the point we did our proposed budget. Worth mentioning though. The next 2 pages are very similar. They're going to reflect and show our expenses, or again, how we're going to spend the dollars that we receive in the general fund. Just want to take a moment to point out, in grand total, 48.6 approximate is the budget, 48.6 million. And on page 37, we reflect that, basically showing you the some individual departments. And if you flip the page, it shows that same 48.6 million, but instead it is broken out by types, meaning salaries and benefits, like where we're spending it, and not necessarily the department or area that's expending it. So I'm gonna flip the page to page 38, because the other page 37 was kind of depicted in the chart that we looked at a little bit earlier. So biggest component here is in wages and benefits. So combined, that's a $31.7 million out of the 48.6, or 65.2% of all of the operating expenses that we have in the proposed budget goes towards. And this salaries and benefits, as a reminder, is just those staff that are included in the general fund. It does not include our utility workers and electric, water, wastewater. They would be reflected in their own funds. One of the next largest pieces in the components is in contract services at 5.4 million. And biggest areas of decrease are at the very bottom. And that is in the capital transfers to other funds. Looks like it's increasing 82% over the prior year. And this basically is just a change and a shift in the funding sources for how we're paying for our capital projects. Meaning in fiscal year 21, we relied more on fund balance reserve use, meaning we relied on prior years' successes and accumulation of dollars to pay for infrastructure. Whereas in fiscal year 22, the proposed budget, we're back to relying more on fiscal year 22 operating revenues that's going to be generated in that year to pay for those projects. And that's the reason where you see the big shift in percentage between those 2 years. So the capital transfers to other funds shows a big increase of 82%. The fund balance transfers for that same type of thing is down about 61%. I think this is probably a very good stopping point. It is still a lot of information very quickly at a very high level. We'll have an opportunity next time. We'll come back and we'll talk again about the general fund. We'll look a little bit more in details at some other charts. But does anybody have any questions? Any comments? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, up next, indoor turf facility with our news media specialist.
I didn't get the memo. Back in January, we were talking about municipal stadium. We agreed that a short-term use for the stadium would be playing baseball, and they're actively doing that. They're there almost every evening, playing various different games. But the longer-term use was the concept of having an indoor turf facility. And I think at that time, we talked about putting out a request for proposal or request for qualifications for developers who might be interested in working with us to design, construct, operate, and maintain an indoor turf facility like what is envisioned. So I drafted an RFP, and it's in your packet, and I certainly want to hear what your input is on various parts of that. I'd like to focus on just two sections, sections 3 and sections 4, and just kind of walk through those, just to make sure we're all on the same page, and then also to get your input on these things. So section 3 is kind of like two public-private partnership scenarios. The first one is simply that we all know the city owns the land, so the city would lease the land to a potential developer at a very low cost. The developer would own and operate the facility. That's very simple. They would finance the debt to build the facility. The second scenario, and the one that's probably more likely to get interest from developers, was that the city would again lease the land. The city would finance the construction of the building, and because of that, we would have more involvement in the design and construction. The developer would pay us back the debt service, and then they would operate and maintain the building. Regardless of which scenario that any developer would choose, the end game here is to wind up with an agreement between us and the developer that would spell out all the details of the arrangement between a developer and the city. So the RFP in itself is just a stepping stone to get us to the ultimate agreement between us and the future developer. I think we need to offer some things to make this more interesting to developers to look at. So we just threw some ideas in section 4, and I'll just go through those quickly. The first is the potential opportunity for CARES Act funding that could come to the city. Michelle and Scott can certainly help me, but I don't know that we understand fully what is going to be eligible for that money and what's not. If we want to go that route where we would use some of that money towards this, I think we need to wait and see what the direction is from the federal government, and then move forward after we know exactly what's eligible. Certainly, we can tear down the stadium facility. That is not really a big number by comparison. It's probably $100,000. Scrap steel right now is really high value, so there's good value there. We could address some of the stormwater issues that we all know that we have down there, and possibly achieve some MS4 credits. That's our stormwater responsibilities that the state mandates on us. Relief of city taxes is potential, but there's all kinds of city taxes that could be involved in there. Real estate taxes might be best abated through the expansion of the enterprise fund. If you have any questions about that, I'll ask Michelle or probably to help me with any other taxes that we may consider abating. Any other utility upgrades or access improvements we could consider doing. All those things could be rolled into this to help make the project more attractive to potential developers. So I guess I'm looking for direction as to whether or not you're ready to move forward with this, what things we want to offer developers, and if you have any comments on what I've put together so far.
So we would decide either scenario 1 or scenario 2 for the partnership, right? Correct?
The way I would look at that is we're offering either
Either or.
scenario, and
Okay,
the developer
okay.
can choose the one they want.
Okay.
just kind of stepping back from it, I would think scenario 2 is the one they're probably gonna want, but,
But this
they
allows
have the
us.
option,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
So I'm good with this, and I think we should proceed with it. I don't know how we put in any funding from the CARES Act money since, I mean, do we just put that possibility in there? I don't think we could put a dollar amount on that.
No.
It's
We're not
too,
gonna know what the restrictions or
Yeah.
guidelines are until the day the money drops, so.
Right.
so do we take it out completely and then it's a surprise, guess what we have?
Well, and I think one of the things that we talked about too was, you know, we have American Recovery Act of 2021, but there is also the possibility of an additional infrastructure bill, another federal bill coming behind. Do we want to wait to see if that bill goes anywhere and leave language in here that literally states that we're willing to provide some type of dollar amount if it's eligible from a federal source? One of the things that I said ironically though to Rodney was, I feel like if we put a dollar value in there and we do that, if the federal source doesn't come to fruition, meaning no more infrastructure bill comes, and we are not, this would become an ineligible use for the ARP money, then are we willing to say that the city wants to put local dollars of that amount in here, or if there's no federal sources that could be utilized for this project, then it would be nothing at that point. And then the other thing is I can't stress enough the bullet about the relief from city taxes. I think we really have to define that one or strike it and just leave the expansion of the enterprise zone there to cover the real estate portion. Because somebody may read that to mean admission and amusement is a tax. You said right here when you put this out,
Right.
no admission and amusement, right?
Yeah.
So I think it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and we just have to define it before we get ready to drop the detail.
I think we just take it out.
I think we'd take it out also.
Okay.
I mean, that's not my call though.
Yeah, I mean, when the city owns the property, let's take the place next door, you know, and there's a restaurant in there, I'm assuming that there's some taxable application to the operations and business personal property tax of that restaurant, even though it's operating on city property. And I think
Yes.
that you would almost treat it the
Yes.
same, you know, and find some other manner in which to incentivize.
So, one of the things to consider with that would be, you know, the developer might not be the end user, so maybe you work that into the lease, to the end user and the end tenant. Because some people include, utilities in the lease amount. Some people also include taxes or have the tenant pay a portion. I just think I think if you don't define it pretty clearly for a developer and then they apply, it just leaves a lot unknown. I mean, here's what we would hate to happen. We would hate to have all this investment and it be really, really great and then have no tax dollars out of it,
Right.
no admission and amusement dollars, no, and I'm not saying, I don't mean to say that in a mean way, but I'm sitting here as the head of the finance operations, and I'm just also wanna make sure that it's good overall and sustainable.
I mean, I think that's kind of how we
Yes.
handle other properties that we own. I don't see where we would, you know, drastically divert from that sort of static position.
Okay.
So we're taking out the relief from city taxes bullet point. Are we taking out the finance funding from CARES Act?
That's what I'd like to see.
Take it
I
out
think we should take
completely.
us both out. Take them both out? Yes.
Okay.
Are you guys okay with the stormwater improvements, expansion of the enterprise zone, utility upgrades, and access improvement?
I mean, I'm
I
okay
mean, I
with
think
all
they're
of
kind of
that.
our responsibility anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we have to bring something to the table.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's nice of us.
Okay, so what else do you need?
Well, I'm okay with building it, funding it, and then leasing it and recovering our investment that way. So, whatever that looks like. whatever funds are available, how we go about it. I know that, you know, I look at what you put down as a possible cost for things. I don't know, I mean, I don't know where you come up with 4.9 million for an 80,000 square foot building, but
That's an actual quote I got from a contractor. That's an actual quote on that size building.
what all does that encompass in that?
It basically is obviously the building, all the operating systems inside, some of the space being of a little bit higher level, like a commercial use, you know, like offices or rented out to other, maybe sports-related businesses. It does not include the turf, and that's included in the contingencies and permitting and that number. But yeah, it's basically the whole building.
Right, to lay turf's like 60 grand a field.
Yeah. That's what we're thinking. Yeah.
You guys okay with the rest of it?
I do want to make a request. Is there a way that we can put a steering committee together in order to evaluate these proposals rather than, I mean, I know nothing about sports. I know how to watch them, but I just wonder, not necessarily like the task force for the skate park, but someone, like a committee of sorts for the
We kinda-
community?
Kind of have one.
Oh, do we
I mean,
have
I
one?
would welcome any assistance that we could get from people that have more experience with these kind of things.
I mean, could we put out like some kind of announcement to ask for, to put a committee together, a steering committee of sorts? Would that be helpful for you?
I
Yes?
think when it comes time, assuming that we get proposals,
Yeah.
when it comes time to evaluating them, it'd be nice to have a group of people that would look at it. I'm not opposed to that.
I mean,
I think that's a good idea.
community input is important. Okay.
So, Michelle, since you're the finance person with all the knowledge. Debt service on $7 million, 20 years, at a great interest rate would probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of $450,000 a year. Probably.
Yes, because we have to be, at this, just thinking off the cuff, it would have to be a taxable, so it would be a little bit higher interest rate than tax exempt, but yes, right now with the market, I would say so.
Yeah.
I think ran the number and it was like 50,000 a month
Yeah.
in that scenario that she's saying, which is 600,000 a year.
But if you could cut out some of the other, like some of the contingency, reduction, and some stuff like that.
Yeah, that's
Here's the
just
point I'm
more.
getting at. If we put out an RFP that says, hey, listen, you know, our goal is a $7 million project that does these things, you know, and our debt service is this much, and we expect to recover that through a lease operation and A&A tax and some other things. Put your proposal together to fit that number. And I think that sparks the interest of those entities out there who can look at that and say, we can do that and still make money.
Right, what's the number?
Yeah. I mean, I mean, I think that's how you gotta approach it when we do that, is, okay, what, you know, where's my break even, and, you know, where's my profit finally? And can I do that in that market? With a building put together that you have here at 4.9 million, so. I think we do that, I think we get interest.
So if I understand what you're saying, that we would tell them what we would need for payment back.
Right.
40,000 a month.
This is how we expect to recover our debt service.
Right.
And, you know, whether it be, you know, and let their accountants figure out that end of it, you know.
Make it work, yeah.
You know, lease payment wise, 8A tax wise, you know, how many events can I have, what can I do, you know, to make that, to put together a business plan that makes that and makes this entity money at the same time. That way, both, you know, the city of Hagerstown recovers its cost, and the entity that's running this is running a profitable business that, you know, can generate other business in the community. And I think I think you get interest on it then. I think if you just send out, you know, I think we end up with the same thing we got the first time. And that won't work. So, you know, let's try to, I mean, I fully believe that this is something that the community wants and will be a benefit to not just Hagerstown, but Washington County and the surrounding area. And I believe that everybody who profits from tourism and all those kind of things will see profit off of a project like this. So let's try to make it as simple as possible and just keep it simple.
Are you feeling okay?
I'm sorry?
Who was that? Are you feeling okay?
Jesus Christ.
Who what? Do you guys have
It's about a win.
What's that?
I mean, that's what it's about.
It's a new day.
Kristen, do you have
It's a
anything
new
to add?
day. A new day.
Don't ruin it for me.
You're right.
Kristen, we're talking about an indoor sports facility. I expect you to say more.
Something.
I just said it all for you.
Especially more than Bob, my
We had dinner
gosh.
last night. It's fine.
No, the difficulty is, like, I've already participated in the committee putting the facts and figures together. I mean, for me, I agree with Bob that doing so gives somebody a better idea. Sort of like when I walk into a house and I look to buy it.
Yeah.
I wonder how much it's gonna cost me for electric and water and sewer, and what are my taxes gonna be, et cetera. Almost like that for somebody. Beyond that, I think I have a greater degree of passion of what it is at the end of the day. Like for me, and why I think scenario 1 and 2 are important, is because we retain ownership. Because I don't want it to suddenly be built and then a year later be somebody's private fitness club, or some entity down the road buys it for some specific, you know, club sport. You know, for me, it's an investment in the youth to be able to use it in sort of a broader fashion, the way that the Westminster and the Frederick facilities organically work to provide that recreational amenity.
And it ensures that it stays that way.
Yeah, and so I think that the turf, and I said this in our discussions, and I think this is a whole separate thing, so I'm just gonna say this about this, and then the other thing is, the turf is obviously something the public has said by and large, and in a wide array, we don't have. We have all kinds of other stuff for recreational opportunity, but we don't have this one particular thing that we all leave to go use somewhere else, right? And so that's, for me, the crux of it is that it has to be a turf facility, because that's that thing. It begs the question that I said to Rodney, that I said to Scott, that I want to ask, when we're done all this, and this is a success, and we have a baseball stadium, and we have a skate park, and we have an indoor turf facility, which is just sort of like an introduction to the opposite of reality of the last 30 years, is if we have these other like 90 gyms that are available, because we hear from other sports entities that say, but we also need it for volleyball, you know, hard court stuff. I want to have that conversation at some point of our gym spaces, the dozens and dozens of gyms we have in this community, and why they aren't more readily accessible for those broader use of youth activities that we recognize exist, that we also hear we should build things for this too.
Right.
Because every one of us can drive by dozens of these gyms on a regular basis and say, yeah, that's empty again tonight, and then we hear, well, we really need gyms for this stuff, and so it's a whole separate conversation. So for me, it's about having a turf facility here and having that conversation about that other item where we already have those amenities and need to maximize their use later.
Rodney, do you have what you need?
I think so. Yeah.
All right, let's go to build a turf facility.
We are moving forward. This is so exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you're still up there.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not going
Go.
anywhere.
I'm hoping to get some help on this one.
Oh, Chief,
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Rodney and I wanted to bring before council something we've been talking about for more than a minute. Actually, since 2017, a piece of property located at 441 South Potomac Street for the purpose of consolidating some public safety assets. So I think the most meaningful way to do this, we have about a half dozen pictures that will probably make more sense if I could just go through the speaking points, Rodney and I, and then we'll go to the photographs and offer up an opportunity to comments and questions. So we're recommending this evening in a 48-page document with 6 additional exhibits, a draft purchase and sales agreement from Columbia Gas for the city of Hagerstown to purchase 1.08 acres of land at that location at a net price of $150,000 an acre for a total of $162,000. That would require a $20,000 deposit. I would remind particularly our newer council members that there used to be a building on that site that in the course of negotiations and that Columbia Gas has raised at their expense. They've graded the site, and as part of making things work out with the site, we actually moved our proposed building about 20 foot further south towards Memorial Boulevard. Columbia Gas is into year 3 of a 4-year environmental remediation plan with the state of Maryland. That slowed things down a little bit only because of COVID and how the state is staffed. This is a project that Michelle spoke to earlier, one of the projects that is part of the general fund balance reserve carryover and can be funded in either FY21 or FY22. So within the draft sales agreement in your packet, there's also 6 additional exhibits. The actual proposed purchase area, which we'll show you in a minute. The larger CMD parcel, which reflects all the property they own out there. A special warranty deed, access easement for public safety units to respond one way onto Sycamore Street from that site to get to the west and downtown areas or portions of that a little faster. A parking easement because part of the combined facility includes a 50-person training room. And then finally, and probably the most important, is the draft environmental covenant. As part of due diligence, Rodney and I have been working with not only the city attorney, but contracted with an environmental specialist who actually drafted the draft purchase and sales agreement on behalf of the city, representing the city's interests. So under additional actions required, we know that it's currently zoned mixed-use IR and medium density residential. Steve Bachmiller believes that one exemption will be required, but no zoning amendment. The alley right-of-way, we would have to abandon the existing alley that runs the length of that property parallel to South Potomac Street and relocate it in an L fashion north of the structure. Once again, we'll share that with you in photographs in a minute. I'm going to ask Rodney to speak to the utilities piece of this. The monitoring that occurred, the picture will make more sense of this, did not occur on the 2 smaller parcels that we will be purchasing. So as absolute due diligence on the city's part, we're recommending that we do some vapor monitoring and additional drilling there. So Rodney, if you can speak to that, please.
Yeah, we just, I would recommend, and our attorney recommends, that we do some additional borings out there to see, just to make sure there's no contamination on that site, and also do some vapor monitoring. This would be the area where the actual living quarters would be. Everything else on behind there has been tested, but this one parcel was a separate parcel, separate from the Columbia of Maryland's holdings that they acquired later. So we feel like it would be prudent for us to do some additional testing there. We don't expect to find anything, but it would be a good idea to do that ahead of time.
Many of you may remember there's the Cassidy Trucking facility, and I knew it as a child as Bester Long Paving. There is also some work to be done with the existing, I don't know how old, brick line storm sewer with waterproof piping.
Probably 150 years old.
That would get done with that as well. And finally, reroute 3 Verizon-owned utility poles off the site and follow the alley back out to South Potomac Street. Anything else on that, Rodney? You think of? So our recommendations this evening for you really to approve the purchase agreement and all 6 exhibits. Once signed, we would proceed then with the remainder of our due diligence items that we just talked about. We believe that at the far outside of that would be a 60 to 90-day venture. I guess one of the other points we would want to make in the exploration by the environmental attorney, under federal guidelines, if there were ever contamination on our parcels, which we don't believe there is, NiSource would own that problem forever as part of federal hazmat guidelines. We discussed their continued responsibility, they acknowledge it, and it's in the finer print of the details of the draft purchase agreement. Okay. We went through this last week, didn't we? There we go. So I'll attempt to fire this thing up. The larger parcel is outlined in red on, that's not shown very on the screen, I'll abandon it. Known as the CMD parcel. To orient yourself, the right third of that is South Potomac Street, north towards the top of the page. Behind it is the railroad tracks, and of course, south is the community gardens and the access to the Public Works parking lot. Okay, this baby's rolling now. The proposed purchase area is outlined in red here. It's 1.08 acres, as we previously described. It's a very busy drawing. We'll try to define some of that other stuff. I will call that, I'm not a color guy, orange, pink, whatever, is a worst-case draft square footage of up to an 8-bay fire station and living quarters for 20 people and headquarters for the HFD and the fire marshal's office. So that was done not that, hey, this is what we're recommending to build. It was done in the worst case if we wanted to consolidate all those assets into one location, that we could appropriately fit it on the lot, and there would be adequate setbacks in compliance with all the rules, et cetera, et cetera. The green are required drainage swales for the property, and this is a slide that is important. If you look at the blue area that runs right through the red polygon, that is the access right-of-way granted in one of the exhibits to Sycamore Street. It intended to be a one-way access, discharge only, with an electric gate through the gas company property. The hashed area is area that they will remediate by a combination of excavation down about 3 feet, as I understand it, and then blacktop to cap it, which is approved by the state environmental folks. This time, the station layout is not pink or orange, it is gray. And you see the 2 highlighted areas in yellow. The reason they are separated that way is the existing alley right-of-way goes between them. So in the draft proposal, it's very hard to see there, but it's in your packet. The alley would come down behind the last townhouses from north to south, and then make a 90-degree left-hand turn and discharge out onto South Potomac Street. That alley would be terminated, and I guess the heavy black dash line right about the center of the picture is the brick-lined drainage culvert that Rodney spoke to, that would require water
It'd be replaced.
would be replaced in its entirety. So most importantly, the red dash line is the area of known contamination after borings and drillings by both the state and Columbia Gas, plus a 25-foot buffer. And as you can see, any of the pieces that we are purchasing is not known to be contaminated, not believed to be contaminated. There may be a better example here. There is the easement to Sycamore Street. Once again, we're back to a pink or orange firehouse location. And the limits of the bigger contamination is in that red polygon. So we've certainly said in the strategic plan and in that update, at the turn of the previous century, they manufactured natural gas here. A byproduct of manufacturing natural gas was the production of coal tar. And coal tar is something that emits vapors and considered a hazardous material, so on and so forth. So they own that problem to remediate it. If you're familiar with the site, you know that their office facility is at the top left of that photograph, and then they have a few other buildings on site. So one of the exhibits is this time in orange and yellow, is a parking easement for not only our apparatus, as you well know, any of you that go by our Church Street headquarters on any given day, we assemble units there for training in our existing training room and shift meetings and the such. So this would be an area for that, and in this 50-person training room, private cars for both career volunteer personnel, et cetera, et cetera. We would not own that area, but we would have an easement to use it in the future. So that's largely it. We're back to that photograph. Rodney, I would ask you if you could think of anything that we did not cover.
I don't think so.
So certainly open up the floor for comments and questions.
One question. Is the reason that we're not acquiring the entirety of the property because we don't want to assume that liability, or because the current owner doesn't have an interest in selling it?
Well, a little bit of both. So Rodney and I made a joint assumption, true or false, that Mayor and Council would want no portion of any kind of environmental liability. Now, that was before we knew that the federal guidelines established that it's their responsibility regardless.
Right.
Because they contaminated the property. But there may be some interest, Eric Dyke and I have discussed the possibility, when we originally started talking with Columbia Gas, if you could take, I'm gonna burn Scott's retinas out, I apologize. If you take that northernmost yellow dash line and go straight back to the railroad tracks, that would constitute about 3 acres in total. So we reduced that to 1 to eliminate all contaminated acreage. There is some belief that if there was appetite for it, to build a larger salt dome or a lean-to type structure to store snow plows, dump trucks, all the things that sit outside now in Eric's shop. You know, maybe that's something they'd be willing to talk about if Mayor and Council had appetite for that. And we'd certainly be happy to engage in a conversation. But on the record, other than speaking with Eric about it, we haven't talked to the gas company about that. So, but I hope that answers your question, Councilmember.
It does. I'm just saying, I think we reached a point where I'd rather get rid of the bad than build around it. That's just me. And I feel like that's kind of what we're doing, and I'd like to venture into that discussion of getting rid of the bad.
When you say get rid of the bad, the approval.
In other words, if we get this, what's gonna happen is that other's gonna sit there for some unknown period of time, in its continued state of
It'll be,
appearance.
it'll look like a paved parking lot. It'll all be paved over.
The remediation plan they've agreed to
Okay.
with the state of Maryland is to excavate down to whatever that depth is.
All right.
I honestly don't know what that is. Refill it and then cap it with asphalt.
Encapsulation.
Yes, and that would be any area inside that red dash line.
Okay. And then I just want to make a comment, because I think that it would be remiss if I didn't at least acknowledge that I did receive the letter from the First Hagerstown Hose Company.
They're in the audience, by the way. was
I know.
gonna hear- Okay.
And I have that awareness, and so I appreciate receiving the letter. And obviously in the letter it mentions, that they have some strong opinions about this, just like I believe that the Southland Fire Company expressed when we had prior occasion to have this discussion. I accept that reality, and appreciate the history that's provided in the letter. And the reality is, this isn't something that came up yesterday. I don't want folks that get this type of communication to get the misunderstanding that we sort of woke up yesterday and thought, hey, it'd be a good idea is to make all these changes. This is years of conversation, in the works. And in fact, I think we had at least one or two prior public sessions over the last 2 or 3 years, where, this was indicated, where I believe we had representatives of at least one of the companies come in during that deliberation. Am I correct in that?
That's accurate.
Okay. And so, here's the reality I face, sitting in this seat. 2 realities. One is, it is apparent that there is not a change and that the Washington County Volunteer Fire and Rescue Association has made a conscious decision to less than fairly continue to fund the volunteer stations that happen to exist in the geographic boundary of the city of Hagerstown. I mean, I have a chart, it's simple math. You can see that there's a difference of approach in how each company is eligible for association and county direct funding. And the second is, it is increasingly as clear that the county does not have, I think, the same level of perspective of the need for professional fire service, looking 50 and 100 years into the future. And we have to do that. I don't think that it's any differently than how we view our obligation to MS4 with stormwater management, how we view our obligation to police services. Any one of those items, we have sort of that responsibility. And so while I certainly appreciate the letter and the concerns expressed, at some point we have to make some movement that is to the improvement of service level to the citizens if the entity that is responsible to provide that obligation, i.e. the county, isn't going to do it. And 3 years ago, I think I sat, when our tables were allowed to be before the pandemic, next to each other, and said, hey, the county needs to get on this, and we need to sort of hold off and figure out how that's going to evolve before we go executing plans to move forward. And I feel like we're past that point. We're just beyond that point. I think we've waited as long as we can, and we say, you know what? We can't continue to operate the way we're operating and continue to provide the level of service that we need to provide for the citizens that we're responsible for. And so I think that's the point we've reached today.
I think there's 2 other points that I neglected to point out is as part of this whole merger consolidation conversations we've been having as my tenure as your chief, we did reach out to the CRS Board of Directors and invite them to enter into conversations about co-locating here for the improvement of their services, which is part of the reason for this extra large, oversized, what-if scenario with no further details of whether they're really interested or what that might look like, moving forward. And the second point I wanted to make is part of our due diligence, Rodney and I have reached out to all the other city directors. Jill Thompson and her group's been very, very helpful with comparables and so on and so forth. So I think it's safe to say that the 150,000 acre is right on target for repurposed industrial land in the city of Hagerstown, based on all of our research.
Thank you, Chief,
Do you guys have
Yes.
any,
doing all this and putting this together. Yep.
you guys good?
I'm good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna move the next agenda item, the request for extension of incentive agreement to another week in the future. So up next, we have application for Invest Hagerstown City Center Grant Program. Ms. Bell.
Good afternoon, everybody. I come to you on behalf of the Review Committee to review an application from Jay Shakdev of JR Investments LLC for the Invest Hagerstown Grant Program for City Center. A quick review of his summary and the request for these funding is the following project highlights. Mr. Shakdev has proposed a project that will include a renovation of his properties at 6 to 16 West Washington Street. There are 3 main renovations that will include. The first floor will have updates to the existing retail opportunities that are there and currently occupied. The second floor would include updates and creation of 18 to 20 telework and co-working offices, all with shared workspaces that will be fully furnished and updated, conference rooms and a shared kitchenette, and these offices and teleworking and co-working spaces would be offered at daily, monthly, and yearly memberships, so that those coming into Hagerstown for meetings and conferences could also work while they were in here in a private office space. On the third floor, 6 to 8 luxury apartments and condos will be put in place that are in line with the city's Partners in Economic Progress Program amenities, that has square footage minimum requirements of personal washers and dryers, and every unit, dishwashers, solid wood cabinets, hardwood floors or carpeting, and all of those modern updated amenities where possible to be put into that location. Mr. Shakdev notes that the tenants would be able to enjoy an urban living experience while having a work atmosphere just steps away from their living spaces, as they would be encouraged to have a membership if they would like in that second floor location, and also be a walking distance from many of our restaurants and entertainment opportunities downtown. His total investment would be $843,000, partially funded by Fulton Bank, and he is requesting $250,000 of our grant funding, and the review committee does suggest to support that at $250,000. Tentative construction start date with full financing would be June 15th, 2021, with an expected timeline of around 5 months for completion. And the review committee recommends providing a project completion grant deadline where receipts and invoices would have to be turned in to receive that money of June 30th, 2021, or 22, rather.
Are you guys good with this?
Yep. Yes.
Questions?
I just had a quick question. This fits within the amount that's allocated for this period for these particular types, right?
Yes.
Do you know how much we have left in that? I'm just curious. For these particular types, the big projects.
I think this is our second of this fiscal year, so I'd say there's still a little wiggle room of this fiscal year.
Okay.
You good? Good.
We can clarify it before the vote next week.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is this officially your last meeting?
Yeah. Tomorrow's my last day.
Boo, yeah. Well, thank
Sorry
you.
about that.
Miss you.
Good luck.
Good luck, yes. All right, up next, Hagerstown Police Department Recruiting Strategy Update. Chief Kiefer.
And hello.
Good afternoon. So I've been asked to come down and just talk to you guys a little bit about our recruiting strategy and kind of where we are. So I thought it'd be important to kind of give you a picture of where we are right now. So as we stand right now, we're authorized at 106 after the last pay raise that the union received. That includes the 2 cadet positions that would be part of that. So actual for us would be 104 of sworn officers. Currently, we have 88. That includes 2 academy recruits that are in the academy now, and we don't have any cadets at the moment. We are testing and doing backgrounds for those positions as we speak. I have 4 that are on injury or light duty status currently. And in May, I should get one of those back, I should get one of those back in 30 to 45 days, based on what he's telling us. I'm probably gonna see at least 3 take most, if not all, their FMLA for the birth of their children, coming up in the next couple months. And I'm down 16 staff members currently. So a little history of that. Since this January, we've lost 8 officers. 1 to MSP, 2 to Boonesboro, 1 to York PD, 1 moved to Louisiana with his family and is getting on an agency down there. 1 to Frederick County Sheriff's Office, and 2 left law enforcement altogether. I've been notified that we'll be losing another one in May to the Sheriff's Department. So in 2020, we lost 14 in that year. 3 to Frederick County Frederick City Police Department, 1 to Frederick County Sheriff's Office, 2 to retirements. 1 of the cadets, as part of the 14, was offered a job and was offered to go into the academy. I decided to go back to college instead. The other cadet we had didn't get through the background, which was also a candidate to go into one of the academies last year. 2 were terminated, 3 left law enforcement altogether, and 1 went to Carlisle PD. So total, since January of 2020, we've lost 22 members of the police department, including 2 cadets. And in May, with the 1 leaving to the Sheriff's Department, that'll be 23. We currently have 5 in field training, expected to reach solo patrol here very shortly. So actually, available for solo patrol today, we have 77. That does not count the 5 that are in field training because they cannot do the job solo by themselves. With the FMLA, temporary leave that we may be seeing will be down to 74. So eligible to retire as of today, I have 7 staff members, including myself. I don't plan on retiring, but I just wanted to let you guys know that there were 7 of us that can retire today. Eligible at the end of the year will be 2 additional staff members. Of those 2, there is a belief that they may retire, at least at the end of the year or sometime in the beginning of next year. With the new credit service time that's been approved with sick leave, and not knowing what these members have in terms of their sick leave banking, in February, March of 2022, there'll be an additional 6 members that could retire a year early with their 25. Planning for this inevitability, we could have up to 15 retirements in the next 1 to 2 years. Again, not everybody's going to. I just wanted to paint a picture on that. So let's talk about the plan and what we're doing. So first, we're doing a really high marketing strategy. We're working with WDVM. They have a production company through their parent company to produce a campaign that will reach over 14,000 people a month on various platforms, including TV ads. This will be a year-long campaign, and we've already contracted with them and we paid for that service, and they are working right now on finishing up the development of that product that we will start rolling out here, hopefully in the next couple weeks. Our social media, I've assigned staff members that are well-versed in social media through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, that are pushing out our recruiting drive and are monitoring that and managing that part of it. So I've got a lieutenant and a sergeant that are heading that up, and they're doing a fantastic job. We're looking into a service that will automate some processes for us. I got an invite from the company that came and showed this to our lieutenant and sergeant that's doing the social media side, and it will automate the incoming stuff. So if a recruit applies through this process, it'll tie it in, automatically send updates and information back to them so that we get rid of the human error that can happen, the delay that can happen with that. So we're looking into a service that will do that. We currently don't have standalone members that can do this, so everything is being taken on by additional responsibilities of members of the department. So we don't have an in-house HR function like a lot of agencies do. Frederick City would be one of them, that their staff, that's all they do. That's all they do is those things. So we don't have that capability here, so we're finding ways to enhance what we do in a very efficient way. So we're looking at two different campaigns. One, traditional campaign of entry-level officers that come in, we hire them, they go into an academy, and then they come out into field training and go into the job. The second is we're looking at an aggressive campaign to look for lateral or comparative compliance candidates. Let me explain what comparative compliance means. Laterals is anybody that's Maryland certified, already has a certification by the Maryland Police Training Commission that says they're a police officer. We can pick them up from any Maryland agency, and as long as they pass through the backgrounds and do their thing, they can hit the street. There's no academy to go to. A comparative compliance candidate is someone from another state, and the easiest one to look at is Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania academies and their certification processes are accepted by the Maryland Police Training Commission. So if we hire someone from Pennsylvania that's already certified, they come on, we can field train them. They have to go through a 5-week classroom-only comparative compliance academy that we host ourselves anyway. So it's a quicker turnaround to get someone on the street. It's getting someone that's either already been a police officer or someone that's gone through an academy in Pennsylvania that we can pick up and save a significant amount of time on and energy. So those are the two campaigns that we're pushing out. So Act 120 academies are what the Pennsylvania academies are called. So we've already reached out to the Indiana University of Pennsylvania Academy, IUP, where several of our guys have attended back in the day, got their original certification and came to work for us. Sent a team up to look at the candidates that are up there. There's 16 in that academy. They graduate sometime in June, and all 16 seem to be interested in coming, or at least testing for us. We asked them to fill out the initial inquiry form that we do on our website. 5 filled that out. We tested last Saturday, and I'll go into that in a little bit. None of them came or were available. So we'll be taking a team back up to IUP to do a combined testing day. So we'll take them up. They'll do the written test with the group, and then they'll do the physical fitness test that's required. So there's 2 of 3 things we need to be done at that point. We are going to be reaching out to other Act 120 academies. I believe there's 6 in Pennsylvania. So we're going to probably focus on 3. There's another one, it's called the HAC. It's in Harrisburg. We're going to reach out to them, see what kind of candidates are available at that academy. And then there's one near Philadelphia and one near Pittsburgh. The other 2 are further north, and we don't think they're very valuable for us to try to reach out that far. So we're going to reach out to at least the HAC as our second option, and then we're going to determine as a team which of the other academies we think would be our best chance to go after, Philly or Pittsburgh. So that, and then we'll follow through with the same process. We'll find out what their interest is, and then take teams to those academies and do multiple testing there to find out who gets through the process to move into the next. We're also going to be looking for certified lateral or PA police officers in this sense. There's a lot of part-time police officers in Pennsylvania. It's just the way their system works up there. An agency like Chambersburg has, an agency about our size, but the majority of their police officers are part-time, and their full-time officers can make a lot more money. So that's just how PA kind of works. So we're hoping to be able to entice some of those part-time police officers that might be working 1, 2, or 3 part-time jobs up there as cops to come here and take advantage of what we have to offer. So that's the other campaign we're going to be looking into. Our hiring process, we're looking to expedite ways to shorten the hiring process without damaging the quality of what we do. We're very proud of our hiring process, and we don't want to damage that. So what are the things we're going to do? We're going to do combined testing. We did one on Saturday, and I'll explain that in a minute. We're going to do more frequent test dates. Right now, we've got them scheduled for this. We have one this month. We're going to do one in May and one in June. We'll reevaluate the need to go beyond that. Do we do one in in July or we wait. We're going to expand our background investigators to incorporate more staff to do background investigations, which is a choke point for the process that we have. Outreach testing, I explained that to you. That's the Act 120 testing. We're going to go to them instead of them come to us. And then we're going to do combined interviews. We do right now 2 interviews. We do a panel interview, which has officers and a sergeant to set on the initial interview with the candidates. And they help to guide us in terms of which candidates we think we should be moving forward into a process. Then we have a command interview process, which is lieutenants and captains set on that for the second interview. So we'll do combined interviews where we'll combine those 2 together to shorten it into one interview, where we'll incorporate commanders and officers and sergeants into one interview process. We think that'll help expedite this process a little bit more and help manage the applicants coming through. So our short-term plan is to aggressively go after certified officer candidates to replenish our ranks faster, whether they're Maryland certified or PA certified or from other states that can be recognized by Maryland. This may become the primary model for us in the future based on how we see our employees managing their life now. You know, long-term employees are starting to, they're at least viewed by, in our profession and others that I've talked to, as being a thing of the past. Someone that goes and works for 25 years, 30 years is starting to become not the norm. So in order for us to maintain efficiency, this may be a model that we go after more aggressively in the future. So our long-term plan is to continue to work with our cadet program and hopefully expand that. We see that as a feeder program for the officers ranks, local kids that can come in at 18, 19, 20 years old, work in that cadet fashion within the ranks of the police department, and then go into the officer status when they hit that 20 and a half year range to get into the academy. We still think that's the future of long-term employment. Continue to recruit locally in hopes to acquire those long-term employees, those that want to serve the community they lived in. They don't want to go somewhere else. We're still hoping that we can make that happen. We want to increase the amount of field training officers that we have. Currently, we're at 10. So when we have an academy, if you have 12 or 15 people need to be trained, we don't currently have enough capacity at field training to be able to do that. So we want to actively push that with our employees to get some more field trainers out there. We want to find additional solutions to make us more competitive with our surrounding jurisdiction agencies. You know, we've had these talks in here before, and that's one of the things that's been a barrier for us, is that we just can't compete up or down 81, and we definitely can't compete east of us. So we need to find some solutions to that. What that looks like, we're in discussion inside the building to figure that out. And we want to continue to seek diversity in our staff. Above all this other stuff, above the lack of staffing, we still want to make sure our staffing is diverse and meets the appearance of the community that we have, which is a very diverse community. So that's still high on the priority for us to continue to do. We want to look into, and then we're looking into an option of maybe hiring part-time retired police officers as a stopgap measure. People that aren't done with the job, want to keep working in the field, but they don't want to work full-time. That's an idea that we've been tossing around a little bit. It's an idea that we could use them to maybe even expand our watch center idea, that they could work inside a building, taking those calls over the phone, not having to be on the street. So those are some additional long-term solutions we think we could work on to fill the gaps when we come into these crises, those that we're in, we get down 16 people. With all that said, I want to talk about some achievements to date of things that we've done. So this past Saturday, we did a combined testing date at HCC. It was a long day. We had quite a few staff there to run this. So we invited 106 candidates that had put in for our inquiry to come and test. We asked for that, we put it out for them. 25 signed up out of those 106. On the day of testing, 21 showed up. 16 of those passed the processes to get to an interview stage of that 21. We brought back 2 that needed to do their physical fitness testing and interview because they couldn't do it at a previous testing that we had. And we brought back 4 that just needed to be interviewed. So all total, we interviewed 22 candidates on Saturday. To give you an idea of the demographics of that Saturday testing date, we had 14 white males, 3 white females, 2 Asian males, 1 African-American male, and 1 Hispanic or Latino male that came in and tested for our process. So we have 38 people to date that have passed a written test and is in some part of our hiring process. 7 of them are in background stage or beyond. When I say beyond, they're either in the polygraph stage or the psychological stage. And we have 3 right now potential lateral or comparative compliance candidates. One's from Howard, one was in the group this past weekend from Howard County. One's a Baltimore City police officer, and one is a young man from a Florida agency that, as it stands right now, wouldn't meet the requirements by the Training Commission to be a lateral or comparative compliance, but he's close. And if he gets through the processes to get to a hiring stage, I'm gonna fight hard with the Training Commission to get them to waive that, to get him to that status so that he doesn't have to go through a full academy again. But that's gotta wait until he gets to the point that we actually hire him to make that argument. We're awaiting personal history statements from 18 of these candidates, of these 38, mostly from this past weekend. That we need to have in our hands before we can assign a background investigator to them. And like I said, we've done a recruiting trip up to IUP already. We have 16 showed interest, 5 filled out the inquiry. We're gonna go back up and test here next week or so, as soon as we can get it set up with the academy director. Our media campaign's been acquired and being produced. Banners have been produced and placed on the railroad overpasses up out near the police department, if you've seen those driving through. Our social media platforms have been updated and monitored by HPD staff, and we've increased the participation of HPD staff overall within our campaign. One of the things that helped drive this excitement about the recruiting side is that we met with the union leadership, and they wanted to know what we could do. I invited them in, and they came prepared. They came prepared with some really good ideas, some things that we've thought about, but they had a different take on it. So we've taken some of the ideas that the union leadership and union members have brought to us, and we're trying to incorporate that into enhancing our recruiting drive. So I feel confident that we will meet the goals that we want to meet. So one of the goals that I set was that this next academy is in November. We had, coming up to this last academy, we had an idea that we were going to have 7 or 8 that we could put in the academy. And at the last minute of those 7 or 8 candidates, we lost some at the very late stages of the hiring process. We had people not pass polygraph. We had people take a job in another state. We had some people fail psychologicals, things that just were not foreseen up to that point, and caught us by surprise. So we wound up only putting 2 in this last academy, which was a disappointment across the board, and a big disappointment for morale for the guys in the department. But with that said, I set a goal for 10 to go into this next academy. And the 10 number comes from what I explained earlier, the amount of field trainers I have to train at the back end of that. That doesn't mean that we're not going to try to hire more people. You know, like we're 16 people down. If I can hire 6 lateral or comparative compliance candidates, that makes up that difference. The problem that we have is that what I said earlier with the potential retirements coming up. We've had this conversation before with this body, that you know that the process takes an exorbitant amount of time to get someone from hiring to solo patrol. And in this case, if I hire you today as an entry level, you don't go into the academy until November. You have a 6-month academy, then you have 4 months of field training. I don't see you until the end of next calendar year, that where you do me any good as the role of that officer. That's not a bad thing. It's just when you start to see that these numbers happen the way they do, when you lose 8 people since January, that number can't be replaced very quickly. Not in the way of an academy kind of replacement. So I may be coming back to ask. Currently, the policy is that I can overhire by one. So at my 106 number, I can hire to 107 with an anticipation of someone leaving. And we will always have somebody leave. Someone's always gonna take a job somewhere else, someone's gonna not make it through field training, someone's gonna get fired, something's gonna happen, or someone's gonna retire. But in the world we live in right now, that may not be good enough to just try to manage waiting for something to happen. Every year that, since I've taken over, I've gone to those people that are in that retirement window, and I've asked them to let me know if they plan on retiring. I've done that every year, and I will continue to do that because I've got a relationship with them. I've worked with them long enough that I believe that they will be honest with me. But things come up. Job opportunity could come up that they didn't plan on leaving, and they want to take that opportunity and walk out. They can leave. We could have other outside influences that could happen that could say, you know what, this isn't for me anymore, I'm gonna go ahead and leave. So having the ability to go ahead and prepare for those vacancies would be a huge benefit. What that looks like is a discussion I have to have with Scott and with Michelle and with other city staff, but I wanted to bring that to your attention, that that's something that we probably need to look at doing, increasing that, whatever that looks like. 2 or 3 overhires. Again, that may be that I never get to that point. I gotta get to the magic number of 106 right now. So without getting to 106, overhiring's just, a dream. So let's put that in your mind so you understand what that is. And then we have worked on, if anybody knows what a Gantt chart is, we've done a Gantt chart every year I've been here. And it's a way for us to manage and look at what the year's gonna look like in terms of staffing and how we can hire and when we wanted to hire. And in the past, we would hire someone for the November Academy in September or October, a few months out, to get them acclimated, to get them to know how things work, get them to know staff, have them do some ride-alongs, do all those things. I don't have that luxury anymore. And the reason why I don't have that luxury is that these people are applying for jobs here and elsewhere. And they are gonna take the first job that's offered to them. So if I got a candidate today that passes through my process, I'm gonna hire them today. That means they're gonna be not a police officer from today until they get out of the academy, but that's the only way I can guarantee that I'm gonna be able to fill that spot based on where we are. So I bring that to your attention because that's the mode that we're looking at doing here. I feel confident that we can pick up some laterals and comparative compliances. Again, I got 3 in my process right now. All 3 may not make it through to get hired, but I got 3 right now. If I could pick up 3 more, there's my 6 that makes up the difference, at least short term, of those that we've lost. If I can hire 9, that means I gotta overhire by 2, because I've already hired people now for an academy, I'm gonna be over my limit. Another avenue is that we could take that 106 and make it a real number of 106 and make my 2 cadets 108. That's another avenue to give me some extra ability to hire to that higher number. So again, discussions that I'm gonna have with Scott and with Michelle, and I've already brought this up to Scott before coming in here today, so this is not I'm not doing this outside of the realm of talking to my own boss about it. He knew I was gonna discuss this. So that's our overall plan, that's our overall game plan. I can tell you that there's a lot of men and women in the department that are worried. They don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. When you get to a point and you see 15 people walk out the door in a very short period of time, that's very demoralizing. And they know you can't recoup those people very fast. So all the things that they want to do in their career get stalled. We go to a basic police force of patrol officers and detectives and things like that, and there's no ability to do the other things that we want to do and need to do. Community resource officers and things like that really put us in the community, making those big differences. So there's some other things we'll do in-house to help mitigate some of those issues and morale issues until we get our numbers back up. But, Hagerstown's a great place to work. It's a fantastic police department that has a lot to offer. And for all those that left, for the reasons that they left, I'm not gonna fault anybody for leaving, that they think they're doing better for themselves, but there's a lot more that stay. So that's gotta say something. And we never talk about the ones that stay. We only talk about the ones that leave. So you guys have a great police department that will still get the work done and keep doing what they're doing. but we've got to find some other solutions, and what they look like, I don't know what they are at this moment. Right now, the focus is to get people back in, and hopefully retain those that come here, so we don't have to go through this again. This is an ebb and flow of our police department, has been for a large part of my career. We sit in a unique geographic location that makes what we do very difficult to keep people. So that's what I wanted to bring up with regards to this. And there's one more thing that I want to at least discuss. With the turmoil that's going on in the country right now over some issues that's happened in Minneapolis and elsewhere, I want to assure this body that that is not your police department. That the men and women of this police department are professional, well-trained, they know what they're doing, and we have been doing this for a long time. A lot of the issues that you see revolve around things that we've been trying to work on since I've taken over to make sure those things don't happen. We have been recently reaccredited after a 4-year process again. We just did this last month and got our final approval for that. And that legislation that's come out from Annapolis, although I disagree with some of it in terms of how far it went, it's something that we will work with and deal with. And that doesn't impact much on us, and the reason why is because we are CLIA certified. Most of what was in those bills were issues that CLIA and the national standards that we already follow are already there for. So for us to migrate into meeting these new legislative updates is a lot less than other agencies may have to do. So I just wanted to reassure you that we are aware of what's going on in the country. We are aware of the tensions that are coming back up again. And we have planned. We have planned for hopefully that it's not a bad outcome on the trial in Minneapolis, and that we will plan for anything that's not a peaceful protest to address those issues and do it in the way that we're supposed to. We did it during the election, and we did it last year during George Floyd. Rest assured, we are prepared, and that you won't have those issues here. That is not your police department. That is not the men and women that we hire. That is not what you have to be concerned about. And I want to assure our community of the same thing.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
When you go, I know the recruiting in different areas is somewhat new. Do you take any sort of packet, or maybe you could work with Jill? I know when a new business wants to come here, for example, they give them an economic development packet that offers like all the great things about our city. So maybe we could do something similar to police officers. Our cost of living is low, all the positives of living in this area. Maybe that's something that we can include when we're talking to people from other areas.
I didn't mention that, but Sergeant Murray and others have been working on a brochure just to that extent. We had a draft sent to myself and Mark Cheney, who you guys know, the Sports Service Administrator, just in the last couple of days. So we've been reviewing that and seeing how we can tweak that to get it professionally produced to take with us to those things. A lot of what we are looking at is talking to our young people to find out how they actually get their information. Do they actually read these things? Do they read pamphlets? How much do they want to look at? So we're really trying to make it worth our while. We don't want to do something just for the sake of doing it. So, but we do have a pamphlet we are working on right now that has those good things that can highlight the benefits of what we have here. Again, we have things that other agencies don't offer. When you say paid holidays, you get paid holidays, but you get to use them as vacation days. Places like Frederick, you don't get that. If you don't work the holiday, then you don't work the holiday. If you work the holiday, you get paid time and a half or whatever our pay rate is, but then you don't get to take that holiday off another day. When you come to work here, you get 12 holidays that you can schedule as vacation days. And if you work the holiday, you still get paid time and a half. So there's a lot of things that just get lost in the big stuff, like just pay, that we have to offer that a lot of other agencies don't. We have our condensed work schedule, a 12-8 schedule that we're working right now. We'll evaluate that schedule here in another month to see how it's going compared to other schedules that were out there. But overall, we're managing through it. It's tough with these losses and with injuries and things that we've got going on. Reducing our our strength, I gotta give the men and women that work in patrol, specifically in patrol, because they're the ones that are most impacted, they get all the credit in the world. I mean, they come to work and they trudge through some of these difficult times, and they still go out and they do the professional job on the street for the people that we all work for. And I can't be more proud of that. That's just, that's who they are. They can gripe and complain in the building amongst themselves, but when they go out on the street, they do the job, and they do it well. And they do it better than anybody else.
Agreed. Next, just a statement, and you kind of just addressed it, but the morale issue, and you spoke to it earlier, with being down so many officers, it's hard, I would imagine, not to have a morale issue, because you can't seek opportunities that you want, specialized units, those kind of things. I hope with these efforts that you have happening now, that it's all hands on deck. I have to admit, I know you guys hate when we compare police department to fire department. It's a little frustrating today, the fire department presents, and we have 3 chiefs and our union president here, but there's no one from HPD. And I would like to see more support for you, more support for the recruitment efforts, and I hope that all of the men and women in HPD just take this as an all hands on deck. Let's fill these positions so we can all do what we want to do. That would be a nice thing moving forward.
Again, we had quite a turnout on Saturday of officers and sergeants and lieutenants, and even the captains were there. I was out there all day. It took a workforce to get Saturday accomplished, and they were excited about doing it, and they all seemed to really enjoy and see the success of Saturday's event. It was our first combined event we've ever done like that, and it was a huge success on our first time out. So we'll do more of those. I've put a thank you out to every one of those members that showed up on Saturday, thanking them, in an email, and got a few responses back that said that they were excited about, doing whatever they could to do more. So we've got a lot of encouraging activity coming from the members of the department that want to go out there and they want to make it better, because they wanted to be able to do the things they want to do within their own profession. They want to move into another division or do something different. They know that having people here and keeping people here is that's the key. If we can't get them here and keep them here, then it's they're going to be stuck where they're at with that, which creates its own morale issues. So morale in policing right now is across the board. I've talked to members in Frederick City, Frederick County, and others. They have similar issues in terms of morale, but for different reasons. So it's the nature of the beast sometimes, but we're turning it around, and I'm proud of the guys, and I think we'll come out of this stronger than we were.
The last thing I have is, what can we do to support you, to help you? I mean, as a body, I understand pay and all those issues that are going to come before us, but is there something just as citizens, but also as elected officials, we can do to support?
I honestly think that from being in that position as an officer and remember what it was like, they don't sit here and they don't get to know you like I do. And, I think knowing in a way, however you guys can do it, that they know that you support them, that's a big thing. I'm not saying you got to show up and come to line up and do those things. I'm not going to tell you how to do that, but they need to know and feel, I guess, not even just know it. They need to feel that you guys support them. And I know you do, but sometimes that gets lost when you start to feel like things are just not going the way you want it to go, and you can't see that light, then everything gets amplified, no matter what that is. So I think just somehow showing that support, whether it's just verbally or however you guys want to do that, is a big key thing. When you see them, when you see an individual officer, just, say something to them, whatever that is. We get it all the time. Someone thanks us for our service, and that doesn't go unappreciated. I think it needs to be more than that coming from you guys. Have a conversation, talk to them. Go a little bit more deeper into what you appreciate about what they're doing, and I know you do. So that would be my suggestion right now.
Thank you. Do you guys have anything for Chief?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. City Administrator.
Mayor, I got a couple of things. First off, just to add just briefly something that Joey said. Ultimately it's all about communication and the ability to communicate with people and not at them. And I think that's one thing that we're all trying to do better at here in the city. And I appreciated the union representatives and police administration coming here a week or two ago and having a good, frank, spirited discussion on issues that we could talk with each other about and not just talk at each other about. And I think that's important in every area of the city, especially in times like this where we seem to be able to say things that have a basis in fact or not. And I really think that being able to communicate and understand each other, and we don't always have to agree, but we can agree to disagree and not be disagreeable. You all have heard me say that before. So I appreciate everything that Joey has done. I appreciate everything staff has done, all the way down through patrol and the detectives and the NTF and the canines and all of them and the civilian staff. And I think that there is going to be a light at the end of the tunnel at some point, and we'll get there. Just one other thing, I've got some things, but they're not date sensitive, so I'll drop those. The 2021 Spring Summer Recreation Guide is out. It's available on the website at www.hagerstownmd.org/Parks and Rec. A lot of great programs that the recreation staff is putting on. So go out and take a look and sign up for some classes. It's outside, again, it's a place to be with as we try to get out from under this COVID situation, and there's a lot of opportunity there. So that'll do it for me, Mayor.
Thank you. Shelley?
I just want to say that even though COVID is still here, the other thing that is also still here is the opioid epidemic, as we all are aware. So Washington County Recovers is going to be offering access to treatment for those individuals that are struggling with substance use disorders, regardless of the ability to pay, and removing the barriers to treatment. Because without the treatment, without immediate treatment, and access to it, their lives are at risk. And I think that we're all aware of that. So on Friday, April 30th, from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the University Plaza, there will be access to treatment and providers available to help those that are in need of substance use disorder treatment.
Thank you. Keisha?
No comment.
Tiara?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Kristen?
Yeah, real quick. I wanted to comment on the news that was received yesterday about the Senate Bill 926. And just wanted to say that, you know, obviously most of us have probably read some of the comments so far, you know, and contrary to the popular misconception out there, you know, of the dozens of city projects or projects, both public and private, that the city's been involved in over the years, this isn't one of them. This isn't ours. We're not funding it. You know, we're not choosing the space and all those other things that go along. This is squarely, you know, a result of folks with influence and affluence at the state level, convincing the state to you know, contribute the entirety of the funding for this largely private venture. So, you know, folks out there saying, hey, you know, why don't we do this or why don't we do that, or, you know, why is the city, you know, that's just not a correct correlation. And in that vein, I certainly, as a member here, I don't take any credit for that, you know, in the success of obtaining the funding, nor do I pretend, you know, to do so and embrace, you know, the fiscal conservatism that some folks are, you know, commenting about as well. You know, it's what government does. It makes those decisions, and it makes them for different reasons. For me, and I think I've said it from the beginning, you know, our responsibilities at this point are the taxes. associated with such a project, and the fees and things associated with utility investment. The trail that we own in the area proposed, and I think I've said this over and over, the parking garage, you know, and those types of infrastructure-oriented, you know, accessory items that go along with it. And as well, and I think we had one here tonight, is the programs that we provide for investment in the buildings, you know, in our urban core, and the reinvestment in them. I think I've said since 2012, you know, I've been, you know, when the issue was that it's Pinnacle, I'm not really pro or anti-baseball, but I think I've been pretty passionate, you know, about my feelings on the location. I think everybody has, you know, feelings one way or another on those things, and we've expressed them as members, but the reality is, and I think I said this at the last session, you know, most of those items of passion that were expressed have been rendered moot, because I think that at the end of the day, we accomplished what our citizens expected of us. At least that's my feeling. I think our citizens were clear. They didn't want to be the owners, they didn't want to be the purveyors, they didn't want to be the funders, the debt servicers. And so in that regard, we have accomplished being none of those. Those rest obviously squarely on the state and the folks that were successful in securing that at this point. So I think that, you know, if folks are looking for those conversations and then include the word city in that, you know, you would be better served to redirect those questions and conversations to the parties that did participate. And, you know, I think that it's no secret that, you know, it's a lot of folks that don't live in the city. And I think that that's a fair assessment. It's obviously, you know, efforts of you know, Republican counterparts and having those communications and you know, putting the right people in the right places to make that happen. And so I think at the end of the day, and you know, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have a number of things going on. Some will be directly involved in, and some less directly involved in. And I think that you'll see a significant amount of change from that. But the bottom line is, I think that the community, the citizens, are the folks that ultimately will decide whether these things are assets or not. And so I think that that's you know, where that and those other items we've talked about will rest.
Good. All right. The only thing I have along the lines of what Shelley just spoke about is I just wanted to give a huge shout out to Irene and Charlene at Brooks House, and also Kevin. They helped me navigate a situation this weekend, and it ended up being a very beneficial situation for everyone involved. I just wanted to say thank you very much for being such an asset to our community. And that's all I have tonight, so we are adjourned.
Wrap. I'm Wes Decker, joined by Police Chief Joey Kiefer. Thanks for joining me, Chief. I know right now, as far as recruitment and retention is concerned, you certainly laid out, a very comprehensive picture for mayor and council and all of the efforts that you're putting into this. So I guess my first question, on the heels of the fact that we just heard from you in the meeting, is as a resident or a citizen of Hagerstown, what should I take away from what you presented during the meeting?
Well, from the community standpoint, I want them to take away that they should see no difference. They're going to see the same level of service they saw before. It's the internal workings of the police department. It's the availability to do things inside that, career-related. That's where a lot of the holdup is. And we'll be working overtime to make sure we're minimally staffing our shifts to the point we need to. And that's just the job. I mean, that's, law enforcement, public safety in general, overtime's the nature of the beast a lot of times. So, but from the community standpoint, they should see no difference. But I want them to understand, that you've got a police department that's low on staff, and it's not a fault of the men and women that are there, and that, take that in mind when you see them out there doing their job, that they're putting in the extra effort and they're taking on additional duties and responsibilities to make everybody safe and to do their job. So I just want the community to know that.
And just like you said to mayor and council, it never hurts to give those men and women, let them know that you appreciate the job that they're doing out there, because this has, as you alluded to during your presentation, this particular profession has become an increasingly more difficult one. And I'm guessing that as the police chief, you probably didn't think that you would be at this point where you would be so much of a recruiter and, almost a psychologist in so many ways, because you sort of outlined, the difficulties with retention, the attrition that comes up, trying to find police officers somewhere else where everyone's trying to find them as it is. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, it's, we've always had a little bit of that here where, men and women would leave. It's really been a recent phenomenon where they've been, heading across the mountain a lot more in those places. But, but the reality is that the profession has changed. And, agencies that are around us that offer bigger salaries, they realize that the model that works for them is to, push that out there and kind of, I'm not accusing agencies of intentionally coming into another agency and recruiting from them, but essentially that's what's happening, and that's across the board. I mean, you look across the state, you look across the nation. That's what agencies are doing, because the pool of candidates has shrunk so much. Less people want to get involved into the profession. And it was dwindling before these last couple of years, but it's dramatically dwindled down even more. So the upside of that, though, I mean, I hate to always kind of have to talk about the negative. I mean, the positive side of all this is that those candidates, those 22 that we interviewed on Saturday, I hold in such high regard, because at a time when people don't want to do the job we're doing, they showed up. They signed up and said, I want to do this. That's the kind of special people that we want. That's the people that we want to put on this badge and carry the gun and go out and do the work we do. And I don't want to lose that because those numbers are less. Almost 30 years ago when I came through and was taking the test, there was two days of just tests, just the written test, and there was over 600 people taking tests.
Wow.
Those days have long gone. To offer 106 people that had put in, saying they were interested in wanting to test with us, and only have 25 respond and 21 show, that is the times have changed. So, I don't want to lose the fact that there's an opportunity here. And that opportunity is that I've gotten more of my staff involved in an area of recruiting that wouldn't have been involved before, which gives them the chance to speak highly of what they do and how they like working here. I'll give you an example. We had, on Saturday, we had one of the police recruits that was one of our cadets that is now in the academy, came out engaged with all the candidates that were showing up that day, and literally did recruiting. He sat with them and talked to them about what it's like here.
Wow.
What the academy's like. You know, it was something that he wasn't told to do. He showed up and did it. That's the kind of activity that, you know, I want to see in the men and women that work here. You know, I was there all day, and I felt that I had to be there all day. And, you know, I can't ask my staff to do things I won't do myself. But to have that example of someone taking and doing that, you know, that's recruiting at the best. It's more intimate. It's one-on-one. It's real. It's not scripted. It's not being told that you got to go do this. So those that showed up on Saturday, you know, that helped with this event, did so because they signed up to do so. So, you know, I'm hoping to get the whole department essentially involved with that process, to get them excited about new people coming in and seeing what that opportunity is, and knowing that hey, this is an opportunity. It's not, don't look at what you don't have, look at what you do and look at what you can have. So, so I'm excited. I'm excited about it. You know, it's still some rough times, you know, and you know, I'm not the guy that's out there handling the calls and doing the heavy lifting. So I don't want to forget that either, and basically downplay that part of it. Still some tough work has to be done, and a lot of extra work by the guys, but you know, they've done it before, they'll do it again, and it's what we do in this profession. So they get the credit. You know, they get the credit for coming up with some ideas and, you know, pushing the envelope a little bit and helping me understand what a different generation thinks like.
And that's something that I was going to get to, because here we are in 2021, you know, for so long, and I don't pretend on my own to know the profession of being a police officer, even over generations, but it sure seems to me like for a long period of time, that's the way it was sort of done. It was based on the pride that individuals took in the community. They wanted to be part of that because they were part of the fabric, and they wanted to make sure that everyone was safe, from their family members to the neighbors on down. And I know it sounds a little sappy, but it seems to me that like that's the way it was, and that just ran in families. It's like if your father was a police officer, you sort of followed in his footsteps, and on and on and on. So with today's generations and where we are now, what are you noticing that's different about the candidates now, good or bad?
You know, that comparison is valid of what you're saying. I think it really just boils down to that. You know, I'll give you an example. When I started this job almost 30 years ago, you know, the day I walked in the door, the day I got hired on, I was going to retire from here. That was my vision. I saw that. You know, where I was going to be in the profession. Never thought I was going to be here, but I was going to retire from here, and
you were content with that.
But it was you know, in my household. My father worked at Grove Manufacturing and retired from Grove Manufacturing. You know, my grandfathers and my aunts and uncles, they all worked at these places for long term. So it was like that's what you do, right?
Right. You had been exposed to that, so it's something that you would aspire to do in whatever profession you chose to be a part of.
So you looked at that, and you figured out how to make that work for you.
Yeah.
And with the generations leading up into this generation, it seems like that's slowly going away. That long-term employment in any profession. I mean, I talked to a landscape person that did some work on my house, and he was talking about how you can't keep people there. That they stay for a couple months or a couple years and they leave. And really, with our profession, if you can get 7 years out of somebody, that's considered long-term anymore. Which is not comforting, but or I say wasn't comforting. I've come to wrap my head around that we need to rethink what a long-term employee is. We need to rethink how we do what we do, knowing that you're not going to have, a whole department of 25-year veterans. You're not going to have that. So how do we manage that? How do we try to keep, a lot more long-term employees, but then knowing that we're not going to keep that in a large number. So, it's not a ding. It's not a downplay on this generation or the previous generation or the one before that. It's just a different attitude, and I think it's just a societal attitude as a whole. Social media and instant gratification and that need to be engaged that need to have someone almost seek you out is the way that the young generations think, that when, I had, again, got to change the way I think. When I came on, it was my job to go get the job, and I needed to prove myself. And in this generation, and again, I hate to say that because it sounds very, old manish to say that. But the reality is that, the reason why we're going to go to IUP and do testing there is because, as we saw, 16 people say they were interested, 5 put out a form, but no one actually came down and tested on a day that we offer a condensed testing day. Again, that's a 3-hour drive down. It's a really long day for them, all that. So we've got to basically show how we want them. We need to be a little different. As I explained to you before we started this, on Saturday we tested all these people and had them there for a whole day. And one of the things we did was we fed them. We went out and bought food and had food for them, so they didn't have to seek that out for themselves. They didn't have to go out and figure out what's going on and maybe miss one of the aspects of what they need to be. We kept them on campus and fed them, left them have some camaraderie, let them interact with staff, with the recruit that I told you about.
Yeah.
That happened because we brought some food. So something as simple as just supplying food. But it got commented on. In some of the interviews, my staff come back and said, man, they commented, a couple of them commented how they were impressed, or why that they were shocked and surprised and impressed that we actually fed them. And it wasn't steak dinners, trust me. It was, but that's the kind of change in how we think and how commanders and administrators need to think, is that they're not going to respond the same way I did 30 years ago.
Right.
It's not the workforce of today, whether it's in my profession or any profession. It's a different way of having to look at life, so we've got to adapt to it.
And a big part of being successful in your line of work, as it is in many, is establishing relationships. So what do you feel right now? How do you gauge the trust and confidence of the community in the Hagerstown Police Department? What's your assessment of that at the moment?
Personally, I get it daily. People will come up and thank me for my service and, say that we're doing a great job. And, we get a lot of feedback like that. And the feedback that I thrive on the most is that during turbulent times, last year in particular, and then the things that are going on just in the last couple of days, couple of weeks, is that I don't feel that rise here of anxiety. I don't feel that that exists. And I think I believe the reason why is that we've spent, I've spent a lifetime, and a lot of these guys have spent a lot of their time, feeding that, making a deposit in the bank, that you see that I'm saving, that I'm doing this, that I mean what I mean, so that when these things happen,
Right.
it's not lip service to say something else, because you have experiences to lean back on and say, that's not your police department. That's not what we see here with our police department. And that goes a long way. We also don't go out and try to tout ourselves just for the sake of touting ourselves. I don't believe in that. I get chastised for that by, some people in the community saying, you need to let people know you did this. I believe in the proof's in the pudding. And for me to show something or produce something or, take you or TV cameras to something to show, hey, look what we're doing in our community, can come across disingenuous. I would rather the people in that community do that. With social media and all that.
Right.
That's being done by the people in the community that see us there actually doing the work, and I think there's a lot more value there with that.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the realness of what we do, and not, they got to show up and for the
Right.
camera show it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think our city administrator hit on it a little bit when he mentioned the word communication, because that's one of the things that really stands out in my mind when you talk about some of the events of last year and what we thought perhaps the trickle-down effect would be here, potentially. And I think just the way that you were able to lead by having the confidence to go out and talk to people and engage in those conversations. What gives you the confidence to do that? Is it part of what you talked about, kind of making those deposits in the bank and having those relationships with the community to begin with? So when those things sort of rise up, they know the face, they know the voice, and there is some sense of trust then?
There's probably a part of that. The thing for me is that I'm going to come out and I'm going to speak truth, and I know what we've done. I know what we haven't done. And I don't fear walking into that arena. A few years ago, we had an incident where we had some protests, and I was asked to go across the street. I wasn't the chief then. And I walked into that situation, very volatile, kind of community, angry situation of something that happened here in our community. And my fear was that I was just going to say the wrong thing, that I was going to make a mistake and just speak out of turn. With all good intent, you say something that just gets taken a different way. And walking across to that crowd, that was my fear. And probably the scariest moment of my whole career, honestly.
Wow.
Of all the things I've ever been involved in, that was probably the scariest thing. Because I felt that I had the community on my shoulders at that point, not to inflame this anymore.
Right, and you choose your words carefully, like you're talking about.
And really be careful how you do that.
Yeah. So they're not interpreted in.
But still be truthful, because
right.
I knew I was going to go across the street. I knew I was going to get asked some hard questions, and you can't treat those situations like political situations where you can not answer the question. You've got to answer the question, and you can't answer the question with something that's not truthful, or you're going to get called on it. And so that foray into that unknown, that very first really big unknown for me, and I've been in meetings, community meetings, where it's been a little tense, but it's usually over something specific that's kind of not that situation. But to walk out of that boosted confidence for me personally, and it gave me that opportunity now to meet people that I wouldn't have met before, people that thought differently than I thought, but the doors opened, that communication door opened up. And then to have events happen, last year, and to be able to go out and speak to crowds of people, that although tense, wasn't near what that was, several years ago. I didn't have that same fear that I was going to say something wrong.
Yeah.
I had a lot more confidence about that. And I had staff, when I walked across the street a couple years ago, it was me. A couple of the guys come over and had my back. I didn't even know they were there. But when I walk out during, protests and talk to people, I had men and women of the department come out and engage with the communities as well, which I was very proud of.
Yeah.
Because that's, even though I said at the top, and I'm held responsible, good or bad, for these things, and I'm usually the talking point for, the agency, the work gets done by those other guys and those other women that do the job every day. So I get to take credit for their good work, and that's, that's not me. That's not somebody that I like to be.
Right.
And, I get to take credit for the bad work, and that is me. That's what I should be taking, but it's a great community. I mean, it really is. I mean, we catch a lot of grief from the trolls on the internet and the people that just bash how bad the city is. And
that's what they're there for.
But that is not what our city is. And,
No, you're
I
right.
was born and raised here. I've got family here. It's a great community, and it's got a lot to offer. And it's just people want to see what they don't have and not what they do have.
Yeah, and then they want to lament that, and then they want to be miserable about it, and they want to make everybody else miserable in the process.
Right.
You mentioned not answering questions like a politician. And, how disappointed are you in the politics that got involved in these police reform bills in Annapolis? I know you touched on this a little bit in the meeting, and I don't mean to put you directly on the spot. It's just the politics that come into it, because we're talking about public safety in the end.
My biggest issue with the politics of that is that we have legislators, and in my lifetime, you look at congressmen, senators, people in those positions, and you think they know what they're doing because that's why they're there. And, the older I've got, the more you really pay attention to those things, you realize that they got elected on what they say they're going to do. but they don't have degrees in economics, they don't have degrees in criminal justice, they don't have degrees in how infrastructure is to work. They don't have degrees in medicine or any of those other things that they create legislation for. So the good legislators listen to the experts that do have that expertise to guide them on where those legislative things should happen. And what I got from this term of legislation is that didn't happen with this particular thing on police reform. You take a valid idea, you take a valid concern of some police reform that needs to happen, and then it just goes beyond what is good for the profession, good for the officers individually, good for your community. And harm hopefully doesn't come as dramatic as it probably will from this police reform here in Maryland, because they didn't listen. They didn't listen to those that know how this is. I don't pretend to walk into a doctor's office and tell a doctor how to do his job.
That makes two of us.
You know, I don't intend to walk into an airplane and tell the pilot how to fly the airplane.
Not going to do that either.
You know, but yet that's what's happened. And I get it. I get why. And I'm not saying there was no need for some reform. But as the sheriff and I had mentioned to congressmen and to others over the last year, you know, look at what is out there available already. And the accreditation process that his department and my department go through covers all those best practices and creates a standard that we meet and have met since 1994. So those are things that make solid police departments. And for the ideas of use of force and those issues, they could have adopted a accreditation standard, very narrow for those 1- and 2-man police departments to be able to meet those things, because they can't do what we do. They're not big enough. But they could take and minimize those things down and pull from that kind of stuff and say, here's what we want to do with a bill. You will meet these things because this is what we see very limited number of police agencies around this country do, and do voluntarily. We weren't forced to do this.
Right.
So there's some disturbing things in the legislation that's come out. It could have been a lot worse. A lot of what's in there, as I said tonight, we already do as part of our national standards that we already meet. So a lot of big parts of that we skip right over because it's already part of our DNA. It's already part of what we do. Some of the other stuff is just some language changes in terms of how we have to adopt some things. But there's a few. There's a few that really could have a major impact on this profession in Maryland. And you know, we'll abide by the law. That's what we do. But we're going to figure out how to mitigate that potential problem with those that work for us now and those that want to come in and work for us, and work within the law and do the things we're supposed to do. But it was a little disheartening to see politicians take and run with an agenda without having all the knowledge and all of the information to make sound legislative decisions. And that's very disturbing for me, very disheartening, and quite frankly angers me somewhat in that sense. I know we had some good people. We had, you know, Delegate Sham and Senator Quarterman fought hard to address these issues on these things. So I really greatly appreciate both of them for all the hard work they put into it. To a point, hopefully, they got some things changed that were going to be worse.
Right.
But you know, in the end, some of the stuff got through, and
Yeah.
you know, we'll live with it.
Yeah,
And
just-
I hope that our community and I hope that our profession doesn't suffer too much from it.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you said there makes a lot of sense, and that's probably why it didn't happen in the end when
Yeah.
politicians get involved, unfortunately. I'll let you go on this one. Make a pitch for recruitment. I'll give you one opportunity here to make a pitch. You've talked about this all night. I know you're probably talking about it in your sleep, so you know, leave us on that particular note.
Well, the Hagerstown Police Department is a great place to work. It's if you want to work in a fast-paced, large city kind of feel, but have that small town approach to it, people here will know who you are by name, but you're going to get to do all the big city stuff and you get to do it all. We're 100% self-contained. We have our own lab. We have a lot to offer, between our benefit packages. I think it's very competitive. We've increased our pay just in the last couple of months, and I know that that'll be another avenue, probably coming up with negotiations here at the end of the year again to even work on that even better. So benefit, leave package, condensed work schedule. We're on a 12/8 work schedule right now, 40 hours a week. You get 3 days off. Health benefits, the whole 9 yards. It's a really good place to work. We also offer here in the city, if you live in the city, a housing allowance. So it depends on where you live within the city. Closer to the core, the more you get towards your housing. But you get some benefit. There's a benefit to being bilingual, that you get a bonus for those things. So a lot to offer. And we have the things that you want to do. We have canine units, we have drug units, we have, different units that we do, community resource officers, school resource officer programs. We're going to hopefully get back up to our numbers, have a street crime unit which goes out and does tactical stuff in terms of the needs of an individual community problem. You go out and you address those things. We district commanders that manage the districts, and we work on a CompStat model and intelligence-led model. So we give you good direction. Training's been a big thing on my tenure here, that increased training for our guys. We've been tasked. I was going to do it last year with COVID, got in the way, but this year our in-service is critical thinking model. So all your training that your hands-on stuff's going to be scenario-based, so that you can walk out onto the street with the confidence that you'll be able to handle anything you want or need to handle. So, our field training officer programs, top-notch. I mean, you get 4 months of field training with officers to see what's going on. We run our own academy with the Sheriff's Department. Again, a lot of what we do, we manage ourselves, which means we hold our own destiny in our hands. And and the whole idea is to bring in you, Wes, as that officer, and say, welcome you in here, be part of this family, and we're going to give you all the tools and give you everything that we can give you that we think is going to be better than our surrounding agencies do, and not putting anybody down around that. But, I feel very confident in the training and what we do for our guys.
Yeah, I feel like you're doing things too well, because that's why everybody keeps snapping up everybody that you've got under your umbrella.
I've felt that here lately, is that, the reason why guys get pulled from Hagerstown is because they're the best of the best. And, and that's, there's the good side of that and the bad side of that. It's just, you got to keep the good ones, you got to keep the really good ones. And, we want them to be the next leaders, and the people that, start off as an officer and never dream of being in the chair that I'm sitting in. I want that to be somebody else coming through the department today, whether they dream of that or not.
Right.
I got lucky, and, hard work will get you there, but a lot of luck will get you there. And I'm proud and privileged and humbled to be the chief of police for Hagerstown Police Department, and to work with, currently 87 other guys in the department. They make me proud, and I would trust them with my life.
Well, thank you to you and everything your department does, and wish you the best of luck on everything with recruitment and retention. I know you're trying everything you possibly can. You'll continue to think outside the box, and look forward to seeing how it all plays out for you, Chief.
Thanks, Wes. Appreciate it.
That'll do it for Council Wrap this morning. We can, or today, this morning, this afternoon, this evening. That's a wrap, Council Wrap for this week. I'll be back after the next work session coming up next week. Until then, so long.